When people first saw Daniel slumped on the edge of a cracked sidewalk with nothing but a tattered backpack, they didn't see a man with dreams, they saw another face among the forgotten, one of countless souls the city had swallowed whole. But what they could never guess was that inside him burned a quiet fire that even the coldest nights couldn't snuff out. Because Daniel hadn't always been broken. Once he had a family, a job, and a home that smelled of coffee in the morning and laughter at night. But life has a way of testing the strongest among us, and a series of tragedies left him standing on the street with nowhere to go. First it was the loss of his mother to cancer, a blow so heavy it cracked the foundation of his world. Then came the layoff from the construction company where he had worked for nearly a decade, his calloused hands suddenly useless in a world that seemed to move faster every day, and when the bills stacked higher than his paychecks, his small apartment slipped through his fingers, leaving him with nothing but memories. And the final wound came when his longtime partner, overwhelmed by the chaos, walked away, leaving him staring at an empty room where love once lived. And that's when the streets became his only address, where park benches were beds and the sound of sirens replaced lullabies. Nights were long and merciless, filled with hunger gnawing at his stomach and shame gnawing at his spirit. Yet even when the city turned its back, Daniel whispered to himself that this was not how his story would end. He refused to let the darkness define him, though it tried every single day, with strangers, cold stares that made him feel invisible in the bitter wind that clawed at his bones. Still he carried within him fragments of the boy he used to be, the boy who once built model houses out of cardboard and dreamed of designing real ones. And sometimes, late at night under the flicker of a broken street lamp, he would sketch shapes in the dirt with a stick, drawing lines that only he could understand, outlines of buildings he imagined rising from nothing, tall and proud, just as he hoped to someday rise again. But surviving was the first battle. And survival meant searching trash bins for half-eaten sandwiches, waiting in long lines at soup kitchens, and fighting the loneliness that threatened to drown him more than hunger ever could. And then, one stormy evening, when rain poured so hard it soaked his blanket through and chilled him to the bone, Daniel stumbled into the shelter of a library doorway, desperate for even a sliver of warmth, and their fate sent him a stranger, a janitor named Robert who saw more than rags and dirt, who saw a man trying to hold on, and instead of walking past like everyone else, Robert handed him a sandwich and said words that stuck to Daniel's heart like glue. "You don't look like someone who gives up." And that night Daniel ate with tears in his eyes, not just for the food but for the reminder that kindness still existed. And Robert didn't stop there. Over the next weeks he began leaving Daniel old books from the library, some about business, some about history, and some about self-belief. And Daniel devoured them with a hunger deeper than his stomach's, sitting under streetlights to read page after page, teaching himself lessons the world thought he was unworthy of. And slowly, a spark began to grow. He started writing notes in a small notebook he found discarded near a bus stop, scribbling ideas about small businesses, about housing for the poor, about second chances, and though they seemed impossible, they gave him something priceless: hope. Then one day Robert told him about a small community program that offered startup guidance for underprivileged people, and though Daniel had nothing but paper and passion, he gathered the courage to walk into that room filled with clean suits and polished shoes, his second-hand clothes clinging awkwardly to his frame, his voice trembling as he pitched his idea of creating affordable housing projects built by and for those who had once been homeless. And though he didn't win the grant that night, one investor in the crowd couldn't forget him. A woman named Sarah who had once watched her own brother spiral into the streets, and she saw in Daniel not desperation but determination, so she approached him afterward, offering mentorship and a small loan, just enough to test his vision. And Daniel seized that chance with both hands, working harder than he ever had in his life, pouring sweat, blood, and sleepless nights into building something from nothing. And though he stumbled, failed, and faced doors slammed in his face, he refused to go back to the man on the sidewalk. Each failure became a lesson, each setback another brick in the foundation he was laying for his future, until slowly, impossibly, his vision began to take shape. His first small housing project rose from the ground, built with the help of men and women who had once been in his shoes, people who knew the sting of cold nights and empty stomachs, people who wanted not charity but a chance to contribute. And when the ribbon was cut on that first building, Daniel stood with tears streaking his dirt-stained cheeks, not because he had succeeded, but because he had turned pain into purpose. And as the years passed, his work grew, his projects expanded across the city, each one carrying the fingerprints of people society had overlooked, and soon his story caught the attention of journalists. The headlines splashed across newspapers, from homeless to hero, and for Daniel, the word hero felt strange, because in his heart he was still the man who once begged the night for one more chance, but now he was also the man who could give that chance to others. And standing before crowds, sharing his journey, He spoke not of wealth or success but of the quiet power of refusing to quit, reminding everyone that a single act of kindness can ignite a revolution inside someone. And when young men and women trapped in cycles of poverty came to him asking how he did it, he smiled and said, "Believe me, the hardest road is not the one you walk outside, it's the one inside your mind, and once you win there, the world can't stop you." And so the man once invisible to the city became its light, building not only houses but hope, living proof that no matter how far you fall, you can rise higher than you ever dreamed. And his journey will always stand as a testament that sometimes, the ones society casts aside are the very ones destined to change it.